Welcome, everyone. It's the cryptolark. Very excited to have back on friend of the show, Mr. Christoph. Mr. Christoph, how's it going?
It's lonely. Very lonely. It's quiet. I'm not at my mining farm. I'm pulling. If Data Dash happens to watch, I'm pulling a page out of your book. I'm doing a bedroom crypto video because I don't have a home office. So, yeah, right now I'm doing the whole social distancing thing, and I actually don't know what to do with myself. To be honest with you.
Well, it's good to sit down and have chats about crypto then, on the internet. It's always a good place to do it. Thank God we have all this great technology in the year 2020 that allows us to have these amazing conversations, but at a very sociable distance of across the ocean. So,
Right. You know what's funny about this? I was actually talking to some buddies who actually work in the more traditional technology world, and they're used to the whole face to face, sitting down at a round table, hashing out ideas. And now most of these guys are working off of Zoom, and it's kind of foreign to them to actually build at such great distances. And I'm thinking to myself, man, step over to the crypto side because I mean, this is a walk in the park. We do this all day, every day. Everything
yeah,
is built with strangers sitting across continents on a screen. So
that's exactly it. I feel like for me, not much has changed except, my out of business stuff, but for the most part, it's I make videos in my basement. I talk to people from all around the world. No one's based in New Zealand except for me. But anyway, that is not going to be the topic of our conversation today. I brought Mr. Christoph on because we're going to be talking about Bitcoin mining. Now, for those of you who don't know, he is a Bitcoin miner. If you haven't seen his channel yet, there's going to be a link down below where you can subscribe and follow along with all of his adventures. But he is a Bitcoin miner. And so we're going to be talking all about Bitcoin mining today because there's a lot going on with Bitcoin mining. And you really need to know how the network is performing, what's going to be happening to small miners, how the Bitcoin halving is going to play out, what is happening with the impacts of this virus on Bitcoin miners, their ability to get new equipment, and all of this stuff. So we're going to be digging into all of that. So make sure you stick around. This is bound to be a really interesting chat. So thanks for taking the time to sit down and, break down the mining situation for us without a doubt. Now, the question I want to start off with first, what is your break even price as a miner? What price do you need Bitcoin to be at?
oh, that is for me here. Okay, if it's the S17, the price of Bitcoin needs to be no less than 42.50 to make sure all costs are covered with the S17. If you're using the S9, your Bitcoin cost, and this is what 5 cents per kilowatt hour. If you're using an S9, you need a Bitcoin price roughly around 97.50, I believe, to break even right now. So it's pretty rough, especially with, I mean, if you look at what mining difficulty is at today, at least 16.55. It's insane. I mean, if you look at it where it's at right now, and you look at the spike at where it's at right now, even with the chaos happening around the world, it's very competitive. It's a
Yeah.
very, very competitive space. There's no room. There's like really, how can I say this? There's no room for the small fish anymore. You have whales coming in here, like it's trying to do a hostile takeover. But it does come with a price. Like I do have a decent sized mining farm, right? Running two. I have a 2 megawatt facility. I'm capable of expanding to 5 megawatts. But right now, the issue I'm running into is really not the cost of running it. It's actually running it. With me not being able to get new machines, uh, I can't fire up the S7, the S9s. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. Actually, getting miners right now is what the issue is. Getting supplies and materials to maintain your mining farms is an issue right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the supply issue is really acute because this is the thing. You've got your S9s, right, sitting there. So you got these
Mm-hmm.
mining computers, and basically you need the price to be close to $10,000 to make it worth even turning them on. Obviously, we're nowhere near that right now. And in about 2 months, less than 2 months, like 7 weeks, those S9s are going to need what, close to a $20,000 break even price to be profitable, right? And your S17s are going to need a approximate break even price around $8,500 in
Right.
7 weeks. In 7 weeks, man, you've been put on notice big time by Bitcoin. That's crazy.
It's no joke, but it's a necessary evil. The halving is a necessary evil. That's the beauty about Bitcoin, and that's a lot of people miss this beauty. We have so many elements in the Bitcoin ecosystem that's designed to keep things in check, right? So, for instance, right now we have institutional miners that are really coming in there, and it seems as if that they're going to take over the space or they're going to own the space. But we also have, so we have the mining difficulty, then we have the market. If mining gets out of hand, the market corrects it. If the market gets out of hand, mining corrects it. You get what I'm saying? It's a balance. It's a delicate little balance. It's a dance. It's a very harmonious dance, but it's a lot like nature. It's kind of funny. We were talking about this earlier, but nature always the natural laws of nature always provide a solution to reestablish the beauty, right? And Bitcoin has those things. I mean, it looks kind of ugly right now. It looks kind of grim, but it's a necessary evil. It will rebalance things out over time.
Are you going to have to close your mining farm down after the halving?
Yeah, the way things are going right now, I don't really have a choice because I have the building, right, which is it's a lease. I don't own the building; it's a lease. I needed to find a place where I can hide it in plain sight, and it's actually hidden in plain sight in the middle of a shopping center. Believe it or not, people walk by it every single day and have no idea it's there. So I have a lot of people there, but that lease is ends the end of this month, and the agreement I have is he gets a percentage of the Bitcoin, right? Which is a pretty good deal. He believes in it, but the problem is I'm not mining, so that lease agreement is null. I can't continue to mine right now because the S9s aren't profitable, and I can't get any more S17s. Uh, I found some S17s, but what they're asking for them is just no. I'm not going to pay for
Mm-hmm.
them. And then the S17s that I know from trusted sources, they're good S17, they're good machines. I can't get them shipped here because of all the bans on shipping from these countries right now. It's a delicate thing. So if I can't upgrade the infrastructure, I'm going to have to, because something else I did this year is I changed the model for my mining farm. Mining farms pay out pretty well, and I paid out more than I should have when I first started to prove the model, to prove the concept of mining, to prove that I can make this work. This year, what we've done is I restructured the thing. So instead of having these massive payouts, I design it to where the mining farm doesn't pay out any more than 6% per year, right? Per annum. And the reason for that is so that we take the residual and keep reinvesting it into the mining farm so it constantly grows more organically. And then we have another structure within that structure, which means when we can take on investors, which means we can grow faster, but we're also providing a place for these guys to invest that is recession proof.
Mm-hmm.
As long as there's no virus going around the world that prevents things from being shipped. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I kind of got blindsided. The whole virus thing, dampening shipping is, it is what it is. Though I don't think though I will shut down the doors. I'm going to fight this tooth and nail. If I have to, I'll move to a different location. I'll move all the equipment. I'll spend the money that's necessary to get the power brought in, because I have all the infrastructure to take the power. I just need now to bring the power to it, which that's very expensive. But I don't know. I'm a believer in this in the future. I am. I believe in that. I don't. I'm a believer in decentralization. So I don't think I'll give it up that easy.
Nice. So even if you have to turn the machines off and maybe walk away temporarily, it's not going to shake you out long term. I just want to go back to the difficulty in really getting new equipment, because I think this is something people really need to understand, how these global supply chains work. Right now, we're seeing a situation where we have a lot of chips for the mining machines themselves actually being made in Taiwan, being made in Japan, being made in different parts of China as well. So between those places, the chips aren't being shipped. People can't go to work to make the chips in a lot of these places. The chips aren't being shipped internationally, or if they are, there's massive delays on moving them from point A to point B. Then you go to like someone like Bitmain, right? And maybe their workers aren't going into work. If they are going to work, maybe they're making the machines, but they're just stacking them up because they can't ship them internationally. They can't ship them around domestically because of all of these things that are in place because of the virus. So actually, people getting their hands on new machines is very difficult to do right now. And you're not alone, right? I mean, miners all over the world are going to be having trouble getting equipment right now.
Yeah, it's the mining equipment that's difficult. And it was funny what you're talking about. I know to be true, but some people argue and say, "Oh no, it's not true. They're running up and running. They're still mining and blah blah blah." But here's something else. Even if the Chinese miners are still running, right? Even if they can get mining equipment, actual miners and power supply units, what they cannot get is the actual infrastructure. They can't get the new breakers. They can't get the new panels. They can't get new disconnects. They can't get new relays. All these things, believe it or not, the number one supplier for mining facilities is Square D, and they're in the United States. And Square D is union owned. So if you're in the United States and you hear that word union, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I say union and disease, that means these guys aren't working. So there's a real severe shortage of supply of Square Ds as far as breakers, panels, wires, and relays and everything else you need in disconnects. General Electric is the second biggest supplier. Again, General Electric, United States, is the biggest supplier of these electrical equipment. You can't get that in China. These massive mining farms have a lot of failures. You can't run that much power without failure. It's just impossible. Things wear out. So there is a huge shortage in that. So I do know that several mining farms, and I know this for a fact because I do get we it's like a small network. You know, you get contacted, hey, listen, can you get a hold of such and such? Can you get a hold of this? Number one thing people are asking for right now are panels. People need panels. They're looking for panels so they can add more power, but they can't add more power. So in some parts of China, there's an abundance of miners that are not running because they can't run. So they're trying to put them in different locations, but they can't move them in different locations because they
Mm-hmm.
don't have the materials. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy. So I mean, things are not great even for the biggest miners. You know, so yeah, it's impacting everybody on every level. So here in the United States, getting what they have in China, can't get it. But they're in China, they can't get what I have here in the United States. You know,
I think
it's
that's
kind
really
of
important to underline that too. I think a lot of people when they think about the companies that make these machines, like something like Bitmain, like they just order lots of different parts in and assemble it. They're not making the chips, they're not making all these little parts. Like they're buying the different parts. And if they can't get that supply chain to get all these pieces together so that they can assemble these machines, the whole gosh darn thing breaks down. But I want to ask you about this. Do you see that?
well, hang on, I
Go
want to
ahead.
interrupt you real
Yep.
fast. There's one thing that's really important about this. So you got to remember, okay, and it's kind of funny. No matter what we try to do in this conversation, it's going to be hard to avoid the whole coronavirus. But because of what's happening with the virus and the he said, she said, Taiwan has taken a different approach than China has as far as managing the virus. Both countries are not exactly seeing eye to eye because of that. That has actually translated and and spilled over to importing and exporting. So right now, Taiwan is not exporting at the rate they were to China certain electronic goods. That's Taiwan is like the is Taiwan is becoming what Japan was back in the 80s and 90s as far as microprocessors, right? As
Mm-hmm.
far
One
as
of the biggest that I mean they make more microchips than basically anyone else, right?
yes. So I mean, you know, there's a shortage, there's a serious shortage of stuff like that. And it's things that people don't really talk about or really understand. So I mean, right now, what's important to understand is miners, especially your big ones, even your mining farms and or mining entities that own pools, things aren't as beautiful or as great for them as people may think they are.
That's what I want to talk about the big miners for a second. Do you see that we could see a massive monopolization of power in the hands of the big miners? I feel like, you know, you're running a relatively small mining operation and in the grand scheme of how big some of these other guys are. So, the smaller miners, a lot of them are going to have to shut, right? Your case is probably not unique in that situation, and you've got relatively cheap power. Not the cheapest, but relatively cheap. A lot of other miners will be operating on higher costs, even above that. But I look
Right.
at companies like Bitmain. Bitmain's a giant miner, right? They're going to have likely, maybe not, but likely enough cash reserves and things like this to be able to ride out the storm, so to speak. So, do you think that once all this blows over and the dust settles, that we're going to have basically a massive monopolization of power in the mining in, let's say 15 or 20 different hands versus the thousands of different miners we have right now?
That's a difficult one to answer because again, it goes back to the fact that the blockchain world, especially Bitcoin, is like nature. It has many different factors that helps to correct itself. But here's my personal thoughts on this one. All right. Um, when you get these big mega mining farms, they have to get investment, right? And what most people don't know is these guys are mining at a loss because of this investment. Power bills are paid on credit. So whenever you have a big 5, 10 megawatt mining facility, you mine, but you don't sell that Bitcoin right away. You take that Bitcoin and you hoard it, and you hire a team of traders. Now that's those traders take a percentage of those trades, by the way. So there's already some loss there. And then you strategically sell and you pay back your loan. But that loan acquired interest too, right? So depending on how long you hoarded and how much credit you had to use, you had to pay back that interest. And then also through that process, you had things that break, machines that we replaced, materials that need
Mm-hmm.
replaced, and you have staff you had to pay. So I mean, that's why there's always these mega mining farms need an excessive investment. So it's super expensive to get too big when it comes to mining. It sounds good, sounds promising. The only people that actually make money are the people involved with it, right? The actual hands-on team. Now, the investors who invest in this. Now, if you yourself watching this and saying, I'm going to invest in a big mining farm, someone's talking me into it. If someone says, yeah, invest one Bitcoin or invest two Bitcoin, and then you're going to make X amount of money over X amount of time, you have to realize if you invest one Bitcoin into a mining farm, you are never going to see that one Bitcoin back. You'll never mine back that one Bitcoin. Mining, when you invest in mining, you aren't actually a true decentralized fan because you're working off of USD. You're working
Mm-hmm.
off of fiat. You're working off of the fact, okay, I invested $10,000 today, which is one Bitcoin today. We're just using keep the math simple. But you're not looking at the Bitcoin value, you're looking at the USD value. When can I get my USD value back? Probably get that back pretty quick, but you'll never get that Bitcoin value back. And that's how these guys are structured, though. They're all based it off of Bitcoins. I mean,
It's a cash business.
it's a cash business, and it's a cash business that runs off of debt, just like every other business that's struggling right now because of the virus, because of the market being down. So that being said, if there's ever a time that institutions own the space, it will not be long. It'll be very short lived, just because I know how volatile that business is, and I know that it has to be debt driven, investor driven, you know, in order for something above 5 megawatts to ever possibly succeed.
Wow. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah, you'd think that, well, the more monopolization of power, the better, but actually, yeah, you see all these different issues that come into it. And, the big guys obviously do have some certain advantages in terms of having lots of money behind them. It doesn't hurt to have $50 million or something to be able to throw at Bitcoin mining, but it also comes with its own issues as well. And we've seen actually some really, really big farm announcements in the United States. I mean, there's three super farms basically that were announced in Texas, one by Peter Thiel, one by Bitmain, and one back. I can't remember the other party, but there were three just gigantic ones. So it's nice, I guess, on the one hand, that there is at least a month ago before everything went down that U.S. is actually putting a bigger geographical footprint into mining. So that's definitely a good thing. So I guess I want to ask you this: if, of course, you're not forced to shut down and go out of business forever. I mean, do you think that the U.S. can actually make itself into a major Bitcoin mining player long term? Because up until now, it's really been just like Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, tiny little country, in the far, far east side of Europe. That's a much bigger miner than the entire United States.
Um, I can't. I'm trying to think of a way to answer this and not seem a little biased about this, but if we didn't have our politicians, it would work. Um, there, if you look at I'll give you an example. So like my mining farm, right? To get this kind of power that I have, I actually worked with my state government and city government with this great idea of trying to introduce mining into rural America. Okay, so I did that. I know what that's about. What happens with that is your state security division wants to get involved,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a lot of questions. The questions are: how does this work? Who makes the money? Who pays the taxes? Is this a securities? You know, um, I actually kind of suspect, in my personal opinion, that the only reason Bitmain is successfully if they actually ever build it and break ground, right? Remember, they announced the same thing in Texas in 2018, and then they canceled it, right? Or was it, yeah, it was in early 2018. They said we're going to build this big $500 million mining farm in Texas, and then all of a sudden it canceled. They promised all these jobs and
Mm-hmm.
sold this hype, and all thing got canceled. And then all of a sudden it's back again. But if this is actually happening, in my opinion, it's going to be a lot like a chain analysis deal. Um, Mining is still that one element that regulators don't quite understand what to do with. How do you regulate that? How do you manage that? Chain analysis has brought a lot of clarity to the securities and the CFTC as far as how to regulate and how to manage and what to look for as far as transactions and trades and exchanges and leverage trading, right? They have a lot of that insight. They have a lot of that knowledge. I think that if this works with Bitmain, if it does actually happen, I think it's going to be a deal a lot along those lines, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I just don't see that kind of that kind of entity successfully doing that without that kind of relationship.
Yeah, there's always these backroom deals that go on, and when you start talking about this kind of money, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of the reality too. Now, I wanted to get your take on the energy markets here because we've seen oil take a massive hit recently, and I think it's up today. I haven't looked at the oil markets today, but I'm pretty sure oil went back up a little bit today. But basically, what we're seeing right now is, aside from all the general panic and the slowdown of global economies, right now, Russia and Saudi Arabia are basically having a massive oil price war, which is going to continually drive the price of oil down globally if it continues. And obviously, if there's a slowdown in demand, which it seems that there is a massive slowdown in demand with airlines and cruise ships and all this stuff, basically going massively into pain. So if that happens, if we do get cheap enough energy prices, do you think that actually we could see a move potentially away from renewables towards oil if it gets cheap enough to power Bitcoin mining? And could that actually be a bit of a savior, do you think, for Bitcoin miners if we get cheap enough energy prices from the oil markets?
So in this community, I'm there for the meetings when it comes to the power buys, what they call it, and it's pretty much the same anywhere you go, except for if you're in a community that has their own uh, power facility, right? Their own nuclear power plant, or own coal power plant, and then things are different for those communities. But most communities that don't have them, especially rural America or the places where you would build a mining farm, what happens is they actually buy power off the grid, right? Because these places don't have their own power plant, so they have to get power brought to them. So they actually buy this power a year in advance in some cases, sometimes even 2 years in advance. Okay, so right now with what oil is doing, the oil driven power is cheaper than what you can get from your solar power or your wind power or your renewable sources. I mean, more of your smaller communities are going to go ahead and start, buying oil driven power at with these prices. I mean, it's business. It's simply it's business. They need to maximize the tax dollar, right? The community tax dollar. So I think as long as oil gets as cheap as it is, it's the cost of purchasing the those kind of power buys and the cost of logistics to get the power to them is cheaper than utilizing the renewable sources. So, I mean, yeah, I think short term, they'll definitely go for it, but it's not going to last like that forever. I mean, if you look at what's happening right now around the world, even though we have a virus holding everyone down, we've put ourselves in a situation where oil demand is beyond where it's ever been in history. So
Mm-hmm.
the moment that things snap back, the price of oil is going to shoot back up with it. So yeah, I think short term, we're going to see more fossil fuel driven power buys, but long term, I think it'll go back to renewable energy.
Nice. And the final topic I want to cover off with you here is it's a big one, of course, but the Bitcoin halving. I mean, we're about 7 weeks out now. So, what are your predictions? As someone who's actually in the game, got skin in the game, you're mining. I mean, what do you see playing out with the Bitcoin halving when it happens?
This doesn't make me popular. I'm just letting you know that right now. No one likes my stances on it because I'm not real. But people
Come on,
understand this.
man! You want to go to the moon? To the
Yeah,
moon!
everybody talks about the moon and everything's gonna double and triple in price. I'm a firm believer in Bitcoin, no matter if it's a $1,000 Bitcoin or a $100,000 Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin, I'm gonna just start off with this. The price of Bitcoin is pegged to the US dollar, right? That's what we peg. That's our cornerstone right now. It's the US dollar. The US dollar just now did another round of quantitative easing of somewhere around 500 to 750 billion dollars. Before this virus kicked in, the US dollar today had a spending power of 2 cents compared to the US dollar of 1775, which had one,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was 1 for 1. Now it's 2 cents. That was 2 cents last week. As of right now, it could be 1 cent. What happens when we drive that spending power to somewhere less than a cent? I mean, it's just paper. We're pegging the price of Bitcoin to just paper. I don't I'm starting as I get into this longer and longer and deeper. I'm not really concerned about getting, a Bitcoin worth $100,000 or $200,000. I'm only concerned about getting as much Bitcoin as I can. You know, I've actually gotten to a point to, like, when I do things, I do consulting or even sometimes sponsorship for projects. I don't, I'm getting to a point where I'm like, listen, I'm worth 1 Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoin, whatever it may be at that time. I don't care what the price of Bitcoin may be in US dollars. We're talking about Bitcoin standard here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that being said, this is why I'm very unemotional when I give my halving prediction. I see Bitcoin values need to exist, not Bitcoin USD values. But as far as the halving goes, Bitcoin has elements now that never existed in any of the other halving events before. These are institutional elements. These are regulatory elements. These are even some other retail elements, such as Bybit and BitMEX. Okay, we have a lot of new elements now. Majority of these new elements that exist, especially on the institutional end, they are designed not to bet on the asset of Bitcoin, but to bet against the price of that asset called Bitcoin. Bet against the price. So if we look at the market now, and any seasoned trader watching this is going to know exactly what I'm talking about when I say traders trade against market makers. When a trader sees that a coin is getting pumped by a market maker, right, or a coin is trying to inflate itself or trying to build its value, it gets traded against because it's going to go up. And you can keep dumping on. You can keep, it's a wash, rinse, repeat thing until they're done. And you know what I mean? It's never ending. So because it's there. With Bitcoin, the same thing's going to happen. The retail world is acting as the market maker who is going to keep Bitcoin going up. Whereas your institutions and some of your retail-driven products like Bybit and BitMEX now can see the future. They can predict the future that people are going to buy out of copium, out of FOMO, because this is
Mm-hmm.
what the past has told us about Bitcoin, and they're going to trade against that. I firmly believe this going to be this halving is going to be traded against for as long as it can be. After that, I do firmly believe the price of Bitcoin will go up. I don't think it'll be a $20,000 Bitcoin right away. I'm thinking more along of somewhere between $9,000 and $12,000, just above just above mining cost, somewhere around there. My personal thoughts. I could be wrong.
Well, that makes sense to me. I mean, we've seen Bitcoin historically largely, keep just ahead of the cost of production, and sometimes it's a bit farther ahead. Sometimes it, drops below the cost of production, but it's worked as a relative scale for how that moves. And so if we see, like we said, after the Bitcoin halving the S17s, which, current, generation of machines, they're going to need an $8,500 Bitcoin to be profitable. And that's the break even for most miners, right? Average
Right.
situation. Some miners cheaper, some miners more expensive, but that's the break even for most people. So at $8,500, that's your break even. But you want to make money. You're in this game to make money, right? So that's why Bitcoin at 9,000 or 10,000, 11, 12,000, right? That's when you're actually making money, right? So That's pretty interesting. I could definitely see that playing out. I think short term, long term, obviously, still a big Bitcoin bull. And I think you bring up a really, really good point too. The one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and that's for people who might be new to the game and you're just looking at, okay, how can I get more dollars for my Bitcoin and a trade to get more dollars and all that stuff? Like that's a game. You can play that game if you want. But I think for the real Bitcoin believers, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and that actually means something. Because $1 being $1, that really doesn't mean the same thing as we've seen. I mean, within my own lifetime, I've watched the U.S. dollar. Like I looked at it and thought, looked at the different inflation charts and stuff. And let's say my dad had given me like $10,000 when I was born and just put it in some account for me that I could get today, right? Well, the
Right.
purchasing power of those $10,000, that would have gone in half. It's just crazy, like the devaluation and the purchasing power of this money. Like he would have had to work, twice as hard back then to get that money. It's crazy how much devaluation we've seen. But okay, the number on the thing, on the piece of paper still says the same value, but that doesn't mean as much anymore because everything's now twice as expensive. It's crazy.
All right. It it's just paper.
It's
It
just
is.
paper.
And if you look at it, I mean, they just made between 500 billion and 750 billion more pieces of paper for you. That whereas Bitcoin, there's only 21 million that ever exist. They predict roughly a quarter of that what's out right now is lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could be more, could be less. But when you hold Bitcoin, even if you hold a fraction of the Bitcoin, you have 0.001 Bitcoin. You're holding something that's precious, you know? And I feel like we're at a time right now where people need to focus more on establishing what is a Bitcoin value. Like this EOS R, this camera I use, right? This is a USD, it's a $3,000 camera. But what is this in Bitcoin value? I should have a Bitcoin value for this, not a USD value. And it shouldn't be based off a USD value. We should figure out what do we think our things around us are worth. What's a cup of coffee worth in Bitcoin?
Mm-hmm.
I really feel we're at that time. We have to establish that because the
Start
more,
talking about the unit of account.
yes, the more we sit there and focus on how much USD is this going to be worth, okay, the more you give the power to the institutional players, even in the
Mm-hmm.
mining realm. The
Mm-hmm.
mining realm, again, they don't care about how much Bitcoin. Don't I'm not. They don't care about how much Bitcoin they're mining. How much USD are they making? Because we'll never get that Bitcoin back that they invest. And that is where we're gearing all of this. Everyone keeps, and it kills me. You go on Twitter, right? If you go on crypto Twitter, everyone talks about, oh, the US dollar is going to fail. The whole financial system's going to fail. And then you hear their solution. But Bitcoin's the solution. Bitcoin will never be inflated. Bitcoin, it can never be more than what there is, and so on and so forth. Bitcoin solves all the problems. But what kills me is we work Bitcoin in the same exact way a stock trader works Bitcoin. We're only worried about the USD value.
Mm-hmm.
We're worried about making $1 million worth of Bitcoin. We're not worried about having 1 million Bitcoin. We're worried about making $1 million worth of Bitcoin. I want to make $100,000 worth of Bitcoin. It's it's a very this space is starting to become the narrative is starting to become very hypocritical, in my opinion. And I don't really think it's the retail investors' fault. I don't. I think it's almost like propaganda, in our space. It is.
there's definitely a lot of propaganda in Bitcoin, without a doubt. You actually brought up a really interesting point too on quantitative easing, because that $700 billion, and look, there's a lot of other money being put up for the repo markets and stuff like this, but that $700 billion, that's not going to be printed in actual dollar. But at least if they were printing the dollar bills out, you would go, okay, well, at least they're doing some kind of work to make the money. But literally, they're just going to go in, open up the Federal Reserve computer program, and just add a couple zeros on the end, and that's it. That's it. That is their proof of work. Mr.
Yep.
Powell sits down for 5 minutes, and let me just add a couple zeros here, and okay, we put another, $700 billion into the economy. Compare that to Bitcoin, right? This global network of, computing power, the most secure computing network in the world, miners all over the world, putting power in, competing, really making something, right? It's a beautiful process when you really get down to it versus just, there's $700 billion. Click.
that's that's what it is. But what's so sad is when we do that here in the United States, Other countries have to do that also.
Yep.
A lot of people don't, and it's funny because I look on Twitter and I watch a lot of people bash the United States for doing that. But because of the fact that all of our economies are now intertwined, we're locked in. We're locked in. This beautiful thing called trade, it's caused us to lock in tightly. So when we do that to our currency, in order for business to be conducted as normal and rates to stay as normal, the other economies essentially have to do the same thing. It's oh, I dropped it.
Whoa!
It's a nasty vicious cycle. It's like a never ending cycle. You
It's
know,
quite it's
it's
quite the dance when you look at the this global economic situation and how everyone, all these central banks are playing this game. But
when to
yeah,
stop though. Let me ask you this: you used to be a professor, and obviously you have you use a lot of objective thinking when you think about stuff like this. How much can we print before you just can't print anymore? I mean, where's that threshold? Because I personally, just when I thought we were there, it's something happens we're not.
yeah.
Where's that threshold?
I mean, if we start talking about when we get into like hyperinflation, right? I think this is what the real
Right.
question is: how long before the money actually dramatically becomes worth nothing? Because right now, what we have with fiat is a slow motion train wreck. That's the way I like to describe it. No one's worried too much because it's happening in very slow time. Losing 2% of your purchasing power a year, that doesn't really, people don't really notice it that much when it happens. If you had 100% devaluation of your local fiat currency in a year, then people really wake up and go, oh my god, what happened? How did this happen? And if you think you're safe because you're in the dollar or you're in the yen or in the euro or in the pound, you're not. You're just not. I mean, we've seen it happen to countries all over the world where they wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden an economic crisis has made it so their local fiat currency is worth half of what it was yesterday. And that's,
Yep.
if you think you're safe, you're not safe. And that's not to be like, oh, the end of fiat everywhere. I mean, look, as long as governments maintain power, as long as there's men with guns willing to enforce the collection of taxes and the regulations of the policymakers, then you're going to have fiat currencies. And if you don't like the sound of that system, if you don't like the idea that you might wake up tomorrow and, have capital controls at your local bank and all these things, then there's an option out there for you. It's called Bitcoin.
I like that. I like that. Again, but I think the most important thing, the narrative needs to be. I mean, think of all the narratives Bitcoin has had uh, over the years. My favorite one, actually, favorite narrative that Bitcoin had was in 2017, and it was bank the unbanked. Remember that? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a narrative for Bitcoin, bank the unbanked, and then of course Ripple took that and turned that into a whole different thing. But we're not going to talk about that.
Yep.
But it's the narrative was bank the unbanked, and then after that, it was the store of value narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin is the store of value, and everyone had this idea that you needed to hoard Bitcoin and wait out for the old money to get bleeded out before new money could be worth anything. And obviously, what just happened with the coronavirus destroyed that narrative, you know. And I think the narrative right now needs to be is to establish Bitcoin. We need to establish Bitcoin. It needs if people want Bitcoin to be that currency, that world currency, we need to establish it. We need to establish Bitcoin values. What is Bitcoin worth? What is that cup of coffee worth? We
Mm-hmm.
can't even if we can't even establish or figure out what one cup of coffee should be worth. A Starbucks, okay, we'll go Starbucks. Let's go expensive. What a Starbucks vanilla latte is actually worth in BTC value, we have nothing.
Yeah.
If we can't even figure that out.
Well, I think an interesting thing that regular people can do in this regard, I know it can be tough because, if you're the coffee seller, you have to make sure that you're getting your profit margin and all these different things. But what I think we can actually do as regular people increasingly is to actually start that economy on a peer-to-peer basis. The corporations and all these guys, they're gonna be some of the last ones to the party. We've even seen with things like, okay, Back's Bitcoin payment thing, what that really is about getting dollars, because Starbucks doesn't want to hold Bitcoin, they want to get their dollars, right? But as a peer-to-peer thing, right? If you need to hire somebody to come and mow your lawn or something like that, well, you can pay them in Bitcoin, right? If you need to, I don't know, sell your car, you could sell your car for Bitcoin, right? And so this is the thing, you can actually establish these kind of barters so that you're not just trading your Bitcoin for more fiat. You can actually be using Bitcoin as a way to act as a medium of exchange between peers. And that's something that everybody can do with their Bitcoin. Or if you're doing services online or you're doing services in real life, say, hey, I would like to be paid in Bitcoin. You can even offer people discounts. Say, hey, you can pay me in cash and it's going to cost you 10% more. You can pay me in Bitcoin and it's going to cost this.
Yeah, yeah.
So something
I
to think
agree
about,
with you.
people.
It does. It starts at the ground level. What your approach on this is absolutely right. It does. It starts at the ground level. It starts with the retail guys. It does. It's always the ground level. But you know what's funny about the retail guys? Everything starts at the ground levels, but the retail guys are the prey. They're the sheep of the crypto world.
Well, to an extent, yes. I think a lot of I think it's not just the crypto world. I think it's every market that retail investors tend to be the ones who make the most mistakes because they've got the least knowledge about those markets, and that the wolves of the markets, so to speak, will be the ones who do prey on those investors. And it's, I think, really down on the retail person to get that knowledge to be able to, you know, walk through a forest filled with wolves.
Yeah. It is. That's just how our ecosystem has been designed lately. It's been more about using the retail investor as the vessel to make the institutional investor more money. It's true.
That's it.
Very, very true. Yeah. Next time we do a video, we should do something on leverage trading. I can teach you some
That would
pretty
be
interesting stuff.
That would be that's a good topic for another day, Mr. Christoph. But actually, we'll finish this chat
Yes.
up here. I think we've got about 45 minutes. I've got some really great info out there for people on Bitcoin mining, the state of mining, what's going on, the effects of the virus, and all that stuff on it. So, man, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your opinion as a Bitcoin miner about what is going on in the mining world. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to come on. I mean, yeah, and we always have good, meaningful conversations.
Awesome,
So,
man. Thank you.
all right. See you.